Hi, I'm Grace Mitchell, and this is the story of how my family learned that sometimes the most powerful people are the ones they look down on the most. In my family, success was measured in dollars and prestige. My older brother James was the CEO of a growing tech company. My younger sister Sophia ran a chain of luxury boutiques, and both were considered the stars of our family. Meanwhile, I was just a high school teacher, or as my family called it, settling for less. The irony? While they flaunted their wealth, I was quietly building an educational empire that would eventually bring them to their knees. It started 10 years ago when I graduated with my teaching degree. While my siblings pursued high-powered corporate careers, I followed my passion for education. But I saw something they didn't: the broken system that left many students behind and the opportunity that created. Teaching? Really, Grace? Dad had scoffed at my career choice. With your grades, you could have been something important. Mom was gentler, but no less dismissive. Honey, teachers barely make enough to live on. How will you maintain our family standard? What they didn't know was that I was already thinking bigger. While teaching during the day, I spent my nights developing an innovative educational technology platform. I saw how traditional schools struggled with remote learning during the pandemic, how private schools charged exorbitant fees for outdated methods, and how many students needed something different. My platform started small, just a few online courses for struggling students. But it grew, powered by innovative AI-driven personalized learning and real-time adaptation to student needs. While my family mocked my little teaching job, I was revolutionizing education. I lived modestly despite my growing success, staying in my small apartment and driving my old car. Why? Because I learned early that true power doesn't need to show off. My family assumed I was struggling on a teacher's salary, never bothering to ask about the educational technology company I'd built. The turning point came at our annual Thanksgiving family dinner. James had just closed a major deal, and Sophia had opened her 10th boutique. The Mitchell family was gathering to celebrate their success, and, as usual, to remind me of my failures. I arrived early to help Mom with dinner, wearing simple slacks and a sweater. Sophia immediately noticed. "Oh, Grace," she sighed, adjusting her designer dress. "Couldn't you have dressed more successfully?" James arrived next, striding in with his usual arrogance. "Hey, it's our favorite charity case. How's shaping young minds, sis? Still making pennies?" I smiled, helping Mom with the turkey. "The students are doing well. Thanks for asking." Dad came in from his study, barely acknowledging me as he hugged my siblings. "James, heard about the deal. Brilliant work, son. And Sophia, your new boutique location is perfect." The dinner table was set with our best china, crystal glasses sparkling under the chandelier. As we sat down, James's wife Amanda started discussing their children's education. "The tuition at Wellington Prep is insane," she complained, naming one of the most prestigious private schools in the city. "But of course, only the best for our kids." "Same at Riverside Academy," Sophia chimed in, referring to where her children attended. "But that's what it takes for success." I took a sip of water, hiding my smile. They had no idea that both schools were now owned by my company, EdTech Innovations, through recent acquisitions. "Well," James smirked, "some of us can afford the best, unlike others who chose to teach." Dad nodded sagely. "It's about ambition. Some people just don't have it." "Speaking of success," James continued, straightening his tie, "I have an announcement. My company just leased the entire Morrison building downtown. Prime real estate, top dollar. He looked at me pointedly. Something a teacher's salary could never touch. Little did he know that my company owned that building too, through a subsidiary focused on educational real estate investments. The lease his company signed was actually with one of my corporations. That's wonderful, dear. Mom beamed. Grace, maybe James could help you find a better career. Something more worthwhile. I opened my mouth to respond, but James cut me off. Let's be honest here. Teaching is for failures. People who couldn't make it in the real world. I mean, look at Grace. Living in that tiny apartment, driving that old car. Is that really someone who deserves to be at this table celebrating success? The room fell silent. Even Mom looked uncomfortable. James? I started, but Dad interrupted. No, he's right, Dad said firmly. This dinner is to celebrate achievement. Grace, maybe it's better if you go. We'll save you some leftovers. I looked around the table. Sophie was studying her plate. Mom wrung her napkin in her hands. James sat back, triumphant. Slowly, I stood up, placing my napkin beside my untouched plate. Thank you for your honesty, I said quietly. I'll see myself out. As I walked to my car, I pulled out my phone and sent 2 emails that would change everything. The first to my legal team, the second to the board of directors. Tomorrow morning, my family would learn exactly what kind of failure they'd just kicked out of Thanksgiving dinner. And their world would never be the same. The next morning dawned crisp and clear as I sat in my downtown office. Not the high school classroom where my family assumed I spent my days, but the executive suite of EdTech Innovations headquarters. I watched through floor-to-ceiling windows as my family members arrived one by one, responding to urgent messages they'd received at dawn. James arrived first, storming through the lobby in his designer suit, demanding to know why his company's lease had been suddenly terminated. Sophia came next, her perfect makeup not quite hiding her panic after learning both her children's school admission had been under review. My parents arrived last, clutching letters about an emergency board meeting of the family's charitable foundation. I watched on the security feed as they were directed to the main conference room, their confusion growing as they recognized each other. What are you doing here? James demanded when our parents walked in. Emergency foundation meeting, Dad replied, waving his letter. But why are you both here? Sophia was checking her phone frantically. I can't reach anyone at the kids' school. Something about new ownership reviewing all admissions. New ownership? James's head snapped up. The Morrison building just got sold too. My entire lease is void. This has to be a mistake. That's when I walked in, still wearing my simple teacher's clothes. The room fell silent. Grace. Mom looked bewildered. What are you doing here? I took my place at the head of the conference table, nodding to my executive team as they filed in with documents. I think it's time we had a family meeting about education and success. We don't have time for your teacher talk, James snapped. Some of us have real business crises to handle. I smiled, sliding folders across the table. Actually, those crises are why you're here. Let me introduce myself properly. I'm Grace Mitchell, CEO of EdTech Innovations and its subsidiaries, including Wellington Prep Schools, Riverside Academy, and Mitchell Educational Properties. The color drained from their faces as they opened the folders. That's impossible, Sophia whispered, staring at the documents. These schools, the property holdings, are all part of my little teaching job. I finished. EdTech Innovations currently manages assets worth $2.8 billion, including the entire Wellington and Riverside school networks, dozens of commercial properties, including your building, James, and the largest educational technology platform in North America. Dad's hands trembled as he read. But you're just a teacher. I am a teacher, I corrected him. One who saw how broken our education system was and decided to fix it. While you were all mocking my career choice, I was building something that would change thousands of lives. I clicked a remote, bringing up our company's portfolio on the wall screen. Every time you dismissed education as beneath you, I acquired another school. Every time you bragged about real business, I expanded our technology platform. And every time you called me a failure, I remembered why I started this, because success isn't just about money, it's about impact. So what now? James's arrogance had evaporated. You're going to kick my company out? Remove my kids from their schools? That depends, I replied calmly, on whether you've learned anything from this moment. I stood up, walking to the window. Education isn't just about teaching facts, it's about teaching values, something our family seems to have forgotten. Turning back to face them, I continued, your lease isn't terminated, James, but the terms have changed. 20% of your office space will now host a free coding academy for underprivileged students. Your children can stay in their schools, Sophia, but you'll be joining the parent committee for our scholarship program. And thus, Mom asked quietly, the family foundation will be restructured. Instead of funding galas and country club memberships, it will provide educational opportunities for students who remind me of the person I used to be, someone with potential that others failed to see. The silence in the room was deafening. Finally, Dad spoke, his voice rough with emotion. All these years, we thought. You thought what you wanted to think, I finished gently. You saw a teacher and assumed you knew my worth. You never asked about my dreams, my work, my success, because it didn't fit your definition of achievement. Sophia wiped tears from her eyes, smudging her perfect makeup. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have listened? I asked. Or would you have tried to take over, like you do with everything else? Over the next few months, our family dynamics shifted dramatically. James's Coding Academy produced its first class of graduates, many of whom he ended up hiring. Sophia discovered a passion for mentoring scholarship students. And my parents, they finally came to one of my classes, not at Wellington Prep or Riverside Academy, but at the public high school where I still taught 3 days a week. Now I understand, Dad said afterward, watching as students crowded around my desk with questions. This isn't settling for less. This is choosing what matters. 1 year later, we had another Thanksgiving dinner. This time, when James talked about success, he spoke about his Coding Academy students. When Sophia discussed her boutiques, she mentioned the internship program for scholarship recipients. And when Dad raised his glass for a toast, he said something I never expected to hear. To Grace, who taught us that the greatest success isn't in what you earn, but in what you give back. To the daughter we underestimated, who became the teacher we all needed. I still live in my modest apartment, still drive my sensible car, still teach at the same public school. But now, when my family gets together, no one asks when I'll get a real job. Instead, they ask how they can help make education better for the next generation. Because sometimes the quiet ones, the ones dismissed as failures, are the ones changing the world, while others are too busy judging what they don't understand. And sometimes the best revenge isn't proving others wrong. It's teaching them how to be right. That's not just good business. That's good education. And in the end, that's a lesson worth more than all the money in the world.
The massive screens in next-gen software's command center flickered with error messages as I sipped my coffee, watching chaos unfold exactly as I predicted. Red warning indicators spread across the global deployment map like a digital wildfire. Europe was already dark. Asia was following. The US servers would be next. "This is impossible," Marcus Anderson, VP of Product Development, shouted at his team of senior developers. "We tested everything. The security protocols were perfect." I held back a smile, remembering his words from this morning's launch meeting. "She's just a QA tester. Her concerns aren't relevant to this discussion." If only he bothered to read my full resume, or perhaps checked who actually wrote the core security algorithm his team had borrowed from the open source community. But that would have required looking past his own prejudices, wouldn't it? My name is Maya Chen, and for the past 2 years, I've been working as a quality assurance tester at NextGen Software, one of Silicon Valley's fastest-growing tech companies. On paper, I was responsible for finding bugs in their software before release. In reality, I was watching, waiting, and documenting every shortcut, every stolen piece of code, every security vulnerability they dismissed in their rush to market. Someone checked the core security module. Anderson was getting desperate now. The US servers had started failing right on schedule. I took another sip of coffee, remembering how this all began. 5 years ago, I developed a revolutionary security algorithm while working at my own startup. The algorithm, which I'd released as open source under a very specific license, had become the foundation for numerous security systems worldwide. Then the tech crash hit. My startup folded, along with dozens of others. While larger companies swooped in to buy up the remains, I made a different choice. I went underground, taking a seemingly low-level position at NextGen, watching as they built their new flagship product on top of my code. "Sir," one of the senior developers called out, "I found something in the security module. The license, it requires attribution and prohibits commercial use without explicit permission from the original author." Anderson's face went pale. NextGen was about to launch a $2 billion software platform, and they just discovered they didn't have the rights to use its core security component. "Who wrote this code?" he demanded. "Get them on the phone now." The original author, the developer read from his screen, is Dr. Maya Chen, published 5 years ago under the Chen-Martinez security protocol. Anderson's head snapped around so fast I thought you might get whiplash. "Chen? But that's—" "Yes," I said quietly, standing up from my corner desk. "That would be me. Dr. Maya Chen, former CEO of SecureFlow Technologies, current QA tester, and the person who's been trying to warn you about security vulnerabilities for the past 6 months." The room fell silent except for the continuing alert sounds from the monitoring systems. Every eye turned to me as I walked to the main console, pulled out my laptop, and connected it to the system. "What are you doing?" Anderson demanded, though his voice had lost its usual arrogance. "Implementing the emergency shutdown protocol that's built into my algorithm," I replied calmly. "The one I designed specifically to prevent unauthorized commercial use. The one I tried to tell you about this morning before you had security escort me out of the meeting." You did this?" His face was turning an interesting shade of red. "Do you have any idea how much money we're losing every minute?" "Actually, I do." I typed in a command sequence and the error messages began to clear. "Just like I know exactly how much money you were planning to make using my intellectual property without permission or attribution." The system stabilized but remained in safe mode, functional but limited. Around the room, developers and executives whispered among themselves, frantically pulling up my background on their phones. Dr. Chen's security algorithm, revolutionary approach to encryption. SecureFlow Technologies, one of the most promising startups before the crash. Over 20 patents in cybersecurity. Anderson slumped into a chair, realization dawning. Why? Why work as a tester if you had all this expertise? I closed my laptop and turned to face him, because sometimes the best way to understand a company's true character is to work from the ground up. To see how they treat people they think don't matter. To watch what corners they cut when they think no one important is looking. "The board will hear about this," he threatened weakly. Yes, I agreed, they will. They'll hear about how you ignored security warnings from your QA team, how you built a $1 billion product on unlicensed code, and how you treated the very person whose work you were trying to steal. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with an email from NextGen's board of directors requesting an immediate meeting. I gathered my things calmly, feeling the weight of all those months of careful observation and documentation. "One more thing," I said, pausing at the door. "Check your employment contract. Specifically, the clause about intellectual property rights for algorithms developed by employees during their tenure. You'll find I've been quite busy these past 2 years." The look of horror on Anderson's face was almost worth all those months of being dismissed and underestimated. Almost. As I walked to the elevator, I could hear the chaos resuming in the command center. They were probably realizing that the emergency shutdown protocol was just the beginning. That my time as a mere QA tester had given me insights into their system that no outside developer could have gained. My phone buzzed again. A message from Maria Martinez, my former SecureFlow co-founder and still my best friend. "Saw the NextGen crashes. Time for Phase 2. I smiled, stepping into the elevator. Phase 2 would change everything, not just at NextGen but across the tech industry. But first, I had a board meeting to attend, where I'd reveal exactly what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should fear most. And sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying a system. It's about exposing its flaws so thoroughly that it has to change. NextGen's boardroom felt exactly like you'd expect from a major tech company, all glass, chrome, and calculated intimidation. 12 board members sat around a gleaming table that probably cost more than my first startup's entire office. Their expressions ranged from barely concealed panic to outright hostility. CEO Michael Torres spoke first. "Dr. Chen, you've put us in quite a situation." "Actually," I replied, opening my laptop, "I've prevented you from putting yourselves in an even worse one." I connected to the room's display system, bringing up my documentation. "Shall we discuss the numerous security vulnerabilities I've reported over the past 6 months? Or would you prefer to start with the intellectual property violations?" The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Board member Sarah Jenkins leaned forward. "You've been documenting everything." "Everything," I confirmed, pulling up folder after folder of meticulously organized evidence. Every dismissed security concern, every ignored vulnerability report, every instance of code theft. But more importantly, I switched to a different screen. I've been developing solutions. That got their attention. In the tech world, problems were common, solutions were gold. During my time here, I've developed a new security framework specifically designed to address the flaws in NextGen's architecture. One that's already patented and fully licensed. I pause, letting that sink in. You can't use my old algorithm without permission, but you could license my new one. The one that's actually designed for your infrastructure. "You developed this while working as a QA tester?" Torres asked, incredulous. "No," I corrected him. "I developed this while working as a QA tester, systems analyst, and security architect. All roles I've effectively been performing, though you only paid me for the first one." Jenkins was already running calculations on her tablet. "The cost to license is considerable," I finished for her, "but less than the cost of a failed product launch and potential intellectual property lawsuits. Much less than the cost of losing your entire security infrastructure 3 months after launch, which is what would have happened if I hadn't stopped it today." One of the board members scoffed. "This sounds like extortion." "This," I said firmly, "sounds like consequences and an opportunity." I opened a new document, my real proposal. NextGen has a chance to do more than just fix a security problem. You have a chance to fix the culture that created it. Over the next hour, I outlined my vision, a complete restructuring of NextGen's development process, emphasizing collaborative innovation and ethical coding practices. No more stolen code, no more ignored security warnings, no more dismissing expertise based on job titles. The tech industry has a culture problem, I explained. We undervalue quality assurance, ignore security concerns, and rush to market without proper safeguards. I chose to work as a QA tester because I wanted to understand these issues from the ground up. What I found was even worse than I expected. I showed them internal communications, development logs, and system vulnerabilities. A damning portrait of a company that had prioritized speed over security, hubris over diligence. The good news is, you can be the company that changes this. That leads the industry in a new direction. I pulled up my final slide. a complete reorganization plan that would make NextGen a pioneer in ethical software development. The board deliberation lasted hours. Arguments flew back and forth across the table. Anderson, called in to defend his decisions, left the room looking like he aged 10 years. By evening, we had a deal. I would become NextGen's new Chief Technology Officer, with a mandate to implement comprehensive reforms. My security framework would become the company's new standard, properly licensed and attributed. And most importantly, we would establish an industry-first ethical development program, emphasizing collaboration across all levels of software development. The changes began immediately. Anderson resigned to pursue other opportunities. The development team was restructured, with QA testers integrated into every phase of development. I made sure Sarah, a junior tester who supported my concerns, was promoted to lead a new security audit team. The tech press had a field day with the story. QA tester revealed as security pioneer, read one headline. NextGen's wake-up call, the high cost of ignored expertise, declared another. Maria stopped by my new office a week after the changes began. Not exactly how we plan to revolutionize the industry, she said, looking around at the space that was bigger than our entire first startup. But it might work better this way. She was right. By changing NextGen from the inside, we have the resources and influence to affect industry-wide change. Other companies, seeing our success, began implementing similar reforms. The practice of borrowing open-source code without proper attribution declined sharply as companies realized the risks. 6 months later, I stood on stage at the National Technology Conference, delivering a keynote speech about ethical software development. In the audience, I could see faces from across the industry, including some who had dismissed similar warnings years ago. The strength of any system, I told them, lies not in its most prominent features, but in its most basic foundations. In software, as in organizations, ignoring those foundations eventually leads to collapse. NextGen's stock had not only recovered but reached new highs. Our new security framework, developed and tested with input from all levels of the development team, set new industry standards. More importantly, our ethical development program became a model for other companies. Anderson? Last I heard, he was working as a consultant, giving talks about the importance of listening to your QA team. I suppose some lessons have to be learned the hard way. A year after that fateful product launch, I sat in my office reviewing applications for our new developer training program. We'd received thousands of submissions, many from people traditionally overlooked in tech, quality assurance testers, support staff, self-taught programmers from non-traditional backgrounds. Sarah knocked on my door, excitement evident on her face. The Ethical Development Certification Program just got approved by the Industry Standards Board. We're officially setting the benchmark for the entire sector. I smiled, remembering all those months of careful observation and documentation. Sometimes, I told her, the best way to fix a broken system is to understand it from the ground up. To see its flaws not as an outsider trying to break in, but as someone working within its lowest levels. The view from my office showed the NextGen campus, now transformed into a model of collaborative development. Teams of developers and testers work together in open spaces, their roles fluid and overlapping. In the distance, construction had begun on our new Innovation Center, a space dedicated to ethical software development and inclusive tech education. My phone buzzed with a message from the board. Our latest security suite had just passed final testing, with unprecedented success rates. The message was copied to the entire development team, from senior architects to junior testers. Another small change that signaled a larger transformation. I thought about that morning in the command center, watching the system crash exactly as I predicted. The revenge I'd sought wasn't just about proving my own worth. It was about proving that the entire way we developed software needed to change. As I write this from my office, watching teams of developers and testers collaborate on our next project, I'm reminded of something I told the board that first day. True innovation doesn't come from rushing to market or cutting corners. It comes from building strong foundations, valuing all perspectives, and understanding that expertise can be found at every level of an organization. The monitors in our command center still show global deployment maps, but now they tell a different story. Instead of cascading failures, they show stable systems, ethical development practices, and a company that learned the hard way that sometimes the most important person in the room is the one you least expect. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about bringing a system down. It's about building it back up, better than before. And sometimes the quiet person in the corner, the one everyone underestimated, turns out to be exactly who you needed all along. The familiar scent of leather polish and motor oil filled my garage as I carefully worked the chainwheel over the gleaming hood of my 1956 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing. The silver paint reflected the afternoon light like a mirror, making the car look almost alive. This was my newest restoration project, and after 8 months of painstaking work, he was finally ready. Still wasting time with your junk cars, I see. I didn't need to turn around to know it was my sister Victoria. Her designer heels clicked against the concrete floor of my garage, each step dripping with disdain. "These junk cars are worth more than your entire wardrobe, Vic," I replied, continuing to polish. "Even that Hermes bag you're carrying." She sniffed, adjusting said bag on her arm. "Please, this bag is a classic. Those cars are just old." I finally turned to face her. Victoria stood there in all her glory. Perfectly styled hair, immaculate makeup, outfit probably worth more than most people's monthly salary. Ever since she'd started dating James Winchester II, heir to the Winchester Industries fortune, she'd become even more insufferable than usual. "What brings you to my humble garage?" I asked, knowing she never visited without a reason. "Mom wanted me to remind you about dinner tonight, though I don't know why you'd want to come looking like that." She gestured at my work clothes, spotted with grease and polish. I glanced down at my worn jeans and vintage mechanic's shirt. "Some of us actually work for a living, Vic. Tinkering with old cars isn't work, Lucy. It's a hobby. A weird, expensive hobby that's eating up your inheritance." She walked around the Mercedes, her heels uncomfortably close to the pristine paint. "Do you know what I did with my inheritance? I invested it, like a grown-up." I bit back a retort. Victoria had invested her inheritance in a designer boutique that was hemorrhaging money. But Daddy kept bailing her out, though in her mind, she was a successful businesswoman. "The wedding planning is going amazingly, by the way," she continued, not waiting for my response. "James's mother introduced me to the most fabulous wedding planner. She did the British royal wedding." "How nice for you." "We're looking at a $2 million budget. The venue alone is $500,000. She paused, examining her manicure. "Of course you wouldn't understand that kind of thing. You spend all your money on these relics." I ran my hand along the Mercedes's fender. This relic was worth $1.8 million after restoration, but Victoria had never bothered to learn anything about classic cars. To her, anything old was worthless unless it had a designer label. "You know," she said, her voice taking on that fake sympathetic tone I hated, "James has some friends in finance. They could help you invest what's left of your money in something sensible, before you waste it all on more junk cars." I straightened up, finally meeting her eyes. "These cars aren't junk, Victoria. This Mercedes, it's one of only 1,400 ever made. That Jaguar E-Type over there, original 1961 flat floor, outside bonnet lock. And that Aston Martin DB5. James Bond himself couldn't get his hands on one this pristine." She rolled her eyes. "God, listen to yourself. You sound just like Dad used to before he got sick. Always going on about carburetor this and chassis that. So boring." The mention of Dad stung. He taught me everything I knew about classic cars, spending weekends in this very garage teaching me how to restore them. Victoria had never been interested, preferring to spend time at the country club with Mom. "At least I'm honoring his legacy," I said quietly, "by becoming a grease monkey." "Please." She checked her phone, probably looking at wedding details. "Dad built a successful investment firm. That's a legacy. This," she waved dismissively at my collection. "This is just you playing with toys because you can't handle a real job." I turned back to the Mercedes, not wanting her to see how much her words hurt. Dad had understood my passion for classic cars. He'd seen it as more than just collecting. It was about preserving history, about bringing beauty back to life. "Anyway," Victoria continued, "the wedding is in 3 months. Mom insists you be a bridesmaid, though God knows why. Try not to embarrass me in front of James's family. They're very particular about appearances. Heaven forbid I show up covered in grease," I muttered. "Just Try to be normal for once." She headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and the dress is pink. Try not to clash with it." After she left, I sank onto my work stool, surrounded by my beloved cars. The garage had always been my sanctuary, but lately it felt like the rest of the family was closing in. Mom had started dropping hints about settling down and finding a real career. Victoria never missed a chance to compare her perfect life with my waste of potential. Even our younger brother Mike, fresh out of business school, had started lecturing me about diversifying my investments. None of them understood what these cars meant to me. Each one had a story, a history that deserved to be preserved. The Mercedes had once belonged to a Hollywood legend. The Jaguar had raced at Le Mans. The Aston Martin, well, that one was special. I walked over to it, running my fingers along its perfect silver birch paintwork. Dad and I had started restoring it together before the cancer took him. It was the last project we worked on, and I'd spent 2 years finishing it alone, determined to make it exactly as he'd envisioned. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Don't forget dinner. Wear something decent. James's parents will be there." Great. Another evening of watching Victoria parade her perfect life while everyone gave me concerned looks. I could already hear the conversations. Such a shame about Lucy. She had such potential. Just like her father with those cars. I grabbed my keys. Regular car keys, not classic ones. As much as I loved my collection, I wasn't stupid enough to drive a $1 million car to dinner. My restored 1969 Corvette Stingray was my daily driver, worth enough to impress real car enthusiasts, but not so much that I worried about parking it on the street. As I got ready for dinner, I couldn't help but think about Victoria's wedding. $2 million for one day seemed insane to me. That kind of money could restore 5 or 6 classic cars, preserving pieces of automotive history for future generations. But that was Victoria, all show, no substance. Everything had to be the biggest, the most expensive, the most impressive. Her engagement ring alone cost more than most people's houses. I chose a simple black dress for dinner, one that Victoria would probably call boring but Dad would have appreciated. He always said true class didn't need to shout. The drive to my parents' house gave me time to think. Victoria's words about Dad's legacy kept echoing in my mind. She was right about one thing. He had built a successful investment firm. But she'd forgotten the most important lesson he taught us. Value isn't always about money. What she saw as junk cars, Dad had seen as works of art, pieces of history that deserved to be preserved. Each restoration project was a challenge, a puzzle to be solved, a story to be continued. I pulled up to the massive Georgian mansion where I'd grown up. Victoria's Bentley was already there, along with an imposing Rolls-Royce that must belong to James's parents. My Corvette, despite being a classic itself, looked almost humble in comparison. Taking a deep breath, I prepared myself for another evening of subtle jabs and not-so-subtle criticism. But as I reached for the door handle, my phone buzzed with a notification that would change everything. It was from Barrett Jackson, the prestigious classic car auction house. Subject line, urgent, regarding 1937 Bugatti Type 57 SC Atlantic authentication. My heart stopped. The Type 57 SC Atlantic was the holy grail of classic cars. Only 4 were ever made, and one had been missing for decades. Surely they couldn't mean. But that would have to wait. Right now, I had to survive dinner with the future in-laws of the sister who thought I was throwing my life away on worthless old cars. If only she knew just how wrong she was about worthless. Dinner was exactly what I expected. Victoria held court at the center of the table, detailing her extravagant wedding plans while James's parents, the esteemed Mr. and Mrs. Winchester, nodded approvingly. Every detail was calculated to impress, from the imported Italian marble dance floor to the Michelin-starred chef flown in from Paris. And of course, we're having the ceremony at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Victoria gushed. Though the waiting list was terribly long, James's mother made a few calls. Mrs. Winchester, dripping in old money refinement, smiled indulgently. Well, one must maintain certain standards. Speaking of which, Victoria mentioned you work with cars. The way she said cars made it sound like a particularly distasteful disease. I restore classic automobiles, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Currently working on a 1956 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing. Mr. Winchester's head snapped up. A Gullwing? Original engine? Completely numbers matching, I said. Even found the original toolkit. For the first time all evening, genuine interest crossed his face. Those are extraordinarily rare. The last one at auction went for. James, darling, Victoria interrupted. Tell them about the string quartet we've booked. But I'd seen it. The flash of real respect in Mr. Winchester's eyes. He knew exactly what a gullwing was worth. After dinner, while Victoria was showing off her engagement photos, I slipped away to read the email from Barrett Jackson. My hands trembled as I opened it. Dear Ms. Harrison, your father's documentation regarding the missing 1937 Bugatti Type 57 SC Atlantic has been verified. We believe the car may have been located in a private collection in Argentina. Given your father's extensive research and your own expertise in pre-war automobiles, we would like to engage your services in authenticating the vehicle. If verified, this would be the most significant automotive discovery of the century. Please contact us urgently. I sat down hard on the stairs, my mind racing. Dad had spent years tracking rumors of the missing Atlantic, following leads across continents. Before he died, he'd shared his research with me, making me promise to continue the search. What are you doing out here? I looked up to find James Winchester standing in the hallway, 2 glasses of scotch in hand. He offered me one. Thanks. I took a sip. 30-year-old Macallan, of course. Victoria says you're wasting your inheritance on old cars, he said, sitting beside me. But I saw your reaction when my father mentioned the gullwing. You understand their true value, don't you? I studied him carefully. They're not just cars. They're pieces of history. He nodded. My grandfather was a collector, had one of the finest automotive libraries in the country. I spent hours there as a kid, reading about legendary cars like the Bugatti Type 57 SC Atlantic. My heart skipped. The Atlantic. The Holy Grail, he smiled. Only 4 ever made. 1 lost to history. Some say it's worth over $100 million, if it still exists. 3 weeks later, I was in Argentina, standing in a climate-controlled garage near Buenos Aires. The Barrett Jackson team waited anxiously as I examined every inch of the dust-covered car before us. The body number matched Dad's research. The engine stampings were correct for the period. Even the unique riveted seams along the body, the Atlantic's most distinctive feature, were exactly as they should be. It's real, I finally announced. This is the Lost Atlantic. The discovery made headlines worldwide. Classic car forums exploded with excitement. Collectors and museums began a bidding war before the car was even officially listed for auction. And suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to me. The girl who wasted her inheritance on old cars was now the expert who had authenticated the most valuable car in history. I returned home to find my garage surrounded by reporters. Victoria was waiting inside, her perfect composure cracking. Why didn't you tell me? She demanded. Do you know how this makes me look? The Winchesters can't stop talking about you. About that, I said calmly. Barrett Jackson is paying me a substantial authentication fee, and I've been offered a position heading their new restoration division. She waved dismissively. Whatever. I need your help. The wedding is in 3 weeks, and James's mother keeps talking about family traditions and something old. She practically sneered at my vintage Cartier bracelet. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. For all her designer clothes and perfect manners, she was terrified of not measuring up to the Winchester family's standards. The Atlantic's first owner was French royalty, I said quietly. The car will be at Barrett Jackson's showroom next week for a private viewing. Very exclusive guest list. Victoria's eyes widened as she understood. You could get us in. I could arrange for your wedding photos to be taken with the most valuable car ever discovered. The one your grease monkey sister authenticated. 2 days before the wedding, Victoria's bridal party arrived at Barrett Jackson's showroom. The Atlantic sat under perfect lighting, its blue-black paint gleaming like liquid metal. Mrs. Winchester actually gasped. Is that? The Lost Atlantic, I confirmed. Worth approximately $114 million, though some say priceless. Victoria stared at the car, then at me. For the first time, I saw something new in her eyes. Respect. The photos are incredible, she said later, showing me the proofs. The Atlantic's graceful lines made even her $100,000 wedding dress look understated. You know, she added hesitantly, Dad would have loved this. He always said you were the only one who really understood his passion for cars. He told me once that true value isn't about price tags, I replied. It's about history, craftsmanship, and the stories these cars tell. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry, she finally said, for calling your cars junk, for not understanding. On the wedding day, as Victoria walked down the aisle of St. Patrick's Cathedral, I noticed something had changed. She still looked perfect, but there was a new confidence in her step. She found her something old, not in a piece of jewelry or a family heirloom, but in understanding that real value doesn't always come in obvious packages. The Barrett-Jackson job meant traveling the world, discovering and authenticating more pieces of automotive history. Victoria and James became regular visitors to my garage, where James would spend hours discussing restoration techniques while Victoria learned to tell the difference between a Mercedes Gullwing and a regular 300 SL. 6 months after the wedding, I received a package from Victoria. Inside was a framed photo from her wedding day, not the formal portrait, but a candid shot of us laughing together next to the Atlantic. The note read, "To my sister, who taught me that the most valuable things in life aren't always the newest or the most expensive. They're the ones with the best stories. Love, Vic." I hung the photo in my garage right next to Dad's old workbench. Sometimes, when I'm restoring a car, I look at it and smile, remembering how a worthless passion for old cars led to the discovery of the century. And when Victoria visits now, she doesn't wear her designer heels. Instead, she borrows a pair of my work boots and helps me polish the Gullwing, eager to hear the stories behind each car in my collection. The Atlantic went on to break every auction record in history, but its real value wasn't in its price tag. It was in the way it brought a family together, teaching us all that true worth isn't always visible at first glance. Sometimes it's hidden under decades of dust in an Argentine garage. Sometimes it's in a sister's newfound respect. And sometimes it's in the quiet satisfaction of knowing that Dad was right all along. About the cars, about me, and about what really matters in life. Every time I open my garage now, I'm reminded that the greatest discoveries aren't always about finding lost treasures. Sometimes they're about finding understanding in unexpected places, about bridging the gaps between people who see the world differently. And sometimes they're about proving that a grease monkey with a passion for old cars can end up teaching her perfect sister the true meaning of value.